Batteries died again, because I'm a mess right now. Question 14 is a book you like that... No, that's the other way around. Hi, my name is Adriana and today I will be doing the 20 questions book tag. I was not tagged by anybody, but that has never stopped me before. I just think it sounds like a really fun tag and I love filming tag videos and watching tag videos. I have the questions here on my phone, so we'll just go ahead and get started. The first question is, how many books is too many in a series? And for me that definitely depends on whether or not the series is actually serialized or if it's more episodic. I talk a lot about the Sigma Force series and the Pendergast series on my channel, and I think at this point Sigma Force is like 15-ish books and Pendergast I think is right around that same mark. But to me it doesn't feel like too many because the books are very episodic. So you can kind of jump into the middle of the series, which I have done on both of those, and understand what's going on, and it doesn't really matter if you haven't read the books before it. So for something like that, I don't care. Do as many books as you want. But for something that is, serialized and you really need to read it in order, I mean, obviously it's up to the author and up to the reader to decide what is too much for them. But for me personally, if there is more than 5 books in a contained series, that's probably gonna keep me from reading it. That's a lot. If I'm jumping into a series and there's already, 6, 7, 8 books and I have to read them in a row and I have to remember what happened in the old ones to understand what's happening in the new ones, that's too much for me. I can't do that. Question number 2 is, how do you feel about cliffhangers? I guess I really have no preference one way or another on how a book ends as long as it's well done. Like, I think a well done cliffhanger can be pretty intriguing. I generally jump into series pretty late, so I don't have to sit there and wait. I don't think I've been new to a series since like middle school or high school, so I think anything at this point that I'm picking up is probably completed, so I don't have to sit there and wait on a cliffhanger. But I think it's kind of fun to like sit and wait on a cliffhanger too, though, if you have to wait for the next book to come out, and makes it a lot more exciting. So I can see why some people don't like them, but I don't really mind them. It doesn't ruin a book for me if it ends on a cliffhanger. Question number 3 is hardback or paperback. If I am buying a physical book, I generally like to go for hardback. I don't know if there's another question on here about ebooks, but I prefer to read on my Kobo because it's light and it's easy to read and carry and pack around. But if I'm buying a physical book, it's because I want to display it on a shelf, and so I like having the hard book copy. I also don't mind reading from hardcovers because you can use like the dust jacket as a bookmark. This is another one where it's not like super preference heavy, but if I'm sitting there with a hard book or with a hardcover option and a paperback option, I'm probably gonna go ahead and buy the hardback just because it's gonna look nicer on a bookshelf. Question number 4 is your favorite book, and like any good reader, I can't pick just one, so I will be talking about 2 books. The first of which is Lovely War by Julie Berry. Honestly, I think when I first read this, I gave it 4 stars, but I read this, I think about 1.5 years ago, and I still think about it all the time, and how, I don't know, this story just impacted me a lot more than I thought it would in the long run. So like, I think I rated it a 4 at the time. The more I sit and think about it and ruminate on the beautiful love story, the framing device, how it all comes together, the inspiration, it's such a well put together book, and it made me cry, and I love it, and I think it's so good. The other book I don't have on me because I keep lending it out because I think everybody needs to read it, but that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I have recommended it to my dad, my best friend. I just gave it to my sister for her to read it, and we're all, writing our little notes in it and talking about it, and I think it's just such a great jumping off point for a lot of really cool discussions with my friends and family, and I think that's what's made it one of my favorite books, just being able to discuss it with people I'm close to and that I really enjoy. Question number 5 is your least favorite book. Definitely have to go with Brave New World. I hate that book so much. I have a 45-minute rant about it on my channel if you really want to hear all the bits and pieces as to why I hate that book, but there are many reasons. One of which is my library doesn't carry the ebook, so then I had to go and buy the book. So now I own an ebook version of this book that I hate, which makes me hate it even more. So I hate this book so much. I had to do that 45-minute rant video so that I could just get it all out of my system, because now I just don't even want to talk about it. Like I got all my words out in that video if you're really curious as to why I hate that book. Question number 6 is love triangles, yes or no? A couple months ago I would have said hard no, but I've been rereading the Percy Jackson series and just recently got to kind of the love-ish triangle, whatever you want to call it. They're like teenagers, so what does it even mean? Between Annabeth and Percy and Rachel. I am kind of enjoying that dynamic. Like, I think I like the love triangle better in YA than I do in like adult fiction, because I think it makes more sense in kind of like a young adult teenage brain to get stuck in this like love triangle thing versus like adults. Like I think it would just make me mad that adults get in this situation, but when it's like kids, you're like, yeah, that's something kids would do. That's a pretty childish thing to end up in, and I can kind of enjoy it a little bit more versus like adults or even like older teenagers. It's like, come on, like just pick someone, or why are you two fighting over this super bland protagonist? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I think for like actual young adult and young teenagers, I think it could be kind of fun. Question number 7 is the most recent book you couldn't finish, and I don't DNF. I think I've DNF'd like 2 books in my entire life. Both of them were like a really long time ago. So I'm gonna kind of reinterpret this question as the last book that was difficult for me to finish. Like it took me a long time because I just wasn't that invested, which is terrible, and I know I shouldn't be doing that, but I do, and you can't stop me. So that is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. There were a couple different reasons as to why I just wasn't that into this book. I was reading Dark Matter by Blake Crouch at the same time, and that book is just, you can't compare the 2 books because Blake Crouch was already an accomplished sci-fi author at the time, so his story was much more engaging to me and just a lot more fun and fleshed out. Axiom's End felt a little slow and stunted here and there. I've heard that her second book is better, so I might give her another chance with the second one, but I just wasn't that interested in the story, and it took me almost a month to get through this book. Question number 8 is a book you are currently reading, and I am currently reading The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. This is the last book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. It was my goal this year to reread the first 5 books in the Riordan verse, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, and to be able to fill out my Riordan verse reading. I read a lot of them when they first came out back in the aughts and early 2010s, so it's been a while, and if I want to read some of the new stuff that he's coming out with, I'd like to kind of re-get that, or I would like to regain some of that context for the rest of the... Sorry if the framing looks a little bit different. The battery died, and then I had to track down a bunch of different stuff to find my chargers and extra batteries. Anyways, moving right along. Question number 9 is the latest book you recommended to someone. I actually recommended this book so recently that I haven't even given them my copy of it, but I recently recommended The Space Between Worlds to my dad. He was kind of fishing for something new to read and asked me if anything I had read recently would spike his interest. I think he'll enjoy this one. We have pretty similar reading tastes, and I really, really enjoyed it, so I think he's going to enjoy it as well, but I'll probably give it to him sometime this weekend. Question number 10 is the oldest book you have read by publication date, and not including like the Odyssey or the Iliad, because technically those were never really like published. They're like oral traditions that eventually Homer like wrote down. So I'm not gonna include those 2 because those are definitely like the oldest narratives that I have read. But the oldest physical book that I have read is 5,000 Miles Underground. It was published in 1908, and I actually read it from like a first or second edition. So the book itself was like 100 years old and the story was 100 years old, and it is a cool Jules Verne-esque story about this big airship that goes through a hole in the earth and they discover a whole new world and go on this adventure in the center of the earth. Batteries died again because I'm a mess right now. And it's just how it's gonna be. So I believe the question I was on was newest book you have read by publication date. That is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I have a physical copy of it, but I don't have it on me right now because I gave it to my mom to read. But yes, that was a really good book. I enjoyed it a lot, and I talk about it in a wrap-up, I believe? Yeah, I talk about it in a wrap-up. So I'll link to that one. Question number 12 is favorite author. I think I have to go with the author that made me want to start a booktube channel, and that is James Rowlands. My first video on this channel is a review of his book, The Last Odyssey. I have loved everything I've read from him so far, although I've only read his adventure thriller books. Apparently he's also a pretty big fantasy writer, so I think I'm gonna have to check out some of his fantasy stuff and see how I vibe with that. Question 13 is buying or borrowing books. I pulled up my stat from my spreadsheet that I use to keep track of all my reading and found that I borrow 46.5% of what I read for this year. This is year to date, 46.5% that I've borrowed from the library versus what I buy, but this number is a bit skewed because I always borrow my audiobooks. I've never bought an audiobook because they are very expensive. So I tend to borrow audiobooks from the library, but I guess I'm about 50-50 on buying versus borrowing. Question 14 is a book you dislike that everyone else seems to love. Again, I have two books for this because I feel like the first one that I picked was a lot more mixed feelings than it is that everybody else loves it, but I did not like Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. That is the first Leigh Bardugo book I read, and it actually made me kind of not want to read Shadow and Bone and like all the other ones, which I really ended up enjoying, but I just didn't like Ninth House. And I think this isn't an unpopular opinion. Like I said, I think people are fairly split one way or another. A lot of people love Ninth House, a lot of people didn't like Ninth House, so it is what it is. The other one I wanted to talk about was Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This one I think is a lot more of an unpopular opinion. It wasn't that I don't actively dislike it, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I have some other romance novels that I have read. But I've heard some other people with similar tastes with me say they like the other two Brown Sisters novels better than the first one, so I might go ahead and check out the other two novels just to see if I like those better. Question 15 is dog ears or bookmarks. I tend to lose bookmarks, so I will dog ear. Like I said, I do a lot of my reading on ebooks, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I will dog ear paperbacks, or since I annotate my books a lot more now, I'll just stick the pencil into the paperback. But if I'm reading a hardback or a hardcover, I'll use the dust jacket and like fold the dust jacket into wherever I am. I kind of do it all, but yeah, I don't keep bookmarks around for very long, but I will use like scraps of paper and stuff sometimes, so kind of just all over the place when it comes to keeping place in a book. Question 16 is a book you can always reread. The great/terrible thing about my reading brain is I tend to forget entire books as soon as I'm done reading them. I think I have about like a week buffer where I can remember a lot of plot and details and everything else about a book, but pretty much as soon as I get halfway through the next book that I'm reading, I forget everything about the last book I read. So I can reread almost any book and still be very surprised by what's going on. But one I do enjoy rereading is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I own the omnibus of all 5 books, but sometimes it's fun just to breeze through the first one. It's so fun and weird and goofy, but that is a book I do enjoy rereading, but I enjoy rereading almost every book because I forget everything. Question 17 is, can you read while hearing music? I do enjoy reading while listening to like acoustic music or music without like words or anything, but I've been getting better about being able to read with like distractions around. It used to be that I couldn't read like with any sound at all, but now I can read with like some light music, and if I'm really into a book, I can actually read while like someone in the room is watching TV, which is great. So it's something that I am working on getting better at, reading with distractions and everything else around, but I do prefer to read in total quiet without any music or anything. Question 18 is one POV or multiple POVs? And I think generally I prefer multiple POVs, especially I have found in romance. I like getting both of the romantic leads' point of view. Like even if you focus on one point of view more often and you only get like a couple kind of snippets of the other POV every once in a while, I do like having both. And then in fantasy novels, or I mean just fiction in general, I think multiple POV is really fun. You get to know all the characters so much deeper as opposed to just one character interpreting the other characters in the world around them. I just feel like you get to get deeper into the world and the story when you see it from multiple points of view. Question 19 is, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Definitely over multiple days. The only book I could kind of say I read in one sitting was Red, White, and Royal Blue, but I was like on and off like planes that day that I was reading it, so I was just like reading a couple hours at a time on a plane and then putting it away as I got onto the next plane or whatever. But even then, like, I don't think I have the attention span to sit down and read for 6 to 10 hours. That's a lot. Question 20 is, who do you tag? I don't know who has and hasn't done this tag. I feel like it's pretty popular, so I imagine quite a few people have. But if you are one of my friends who comments a lot and we watch each other's videos and you haven't done it, I would love to see you do it, just because I think it's a kind of a cool, I don't know, get to learn a lot about you as a reader, and answering these questions is a lot of fun. So thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.